something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children.
Well, welcome to Occupy TV here in Eugene. My name is Casey. I'm here right now with Devin Roy and Mel Sweet, filmmakers from my hometown of Bend, Oregon. They're making a documentary film called Occupied Cascadia, and we're going to talk about that for the next little while. Okay, so let's start out. You're making a documentary film, and it seems you started out filming with the Occupy movement here in the Cascadia bioregion. Was that your original intent when you set out to make a documentary?
No, it actually was not our original intent. We had been planning for a few months to do a film on Cascadia specifically, and right as we were gearing up to head out and tour around the bioregion to start filming, Occupy Wall Street in New York broke out, and it actually hadn't been publicized on the news at this point. We kind of found it through a backwards station, and all of a sudden we were really excited about that. So the original plan was, let's go to New York and start filming this. This is going to be a big deal. And soon after that, we found out that Portland was going to be doing a large march in solidarity with it, amongst many other places across the nation, thousands really across the world. So it seemed like a much more feasible thing to tour around the bioregion, especially considering the parallel path with the injustice that it talks about and the movement of Cascadia as well. So we toured to Portland for the first day of their march. We went up to Vancouver, BC. We stopped by Seattle, Washington, and eventually we even made it down to Oakland, California for some of their protests as well. Anything to add?
Okay. So what was your experience of that? Occupy is a newer thing, newer idea, and had you been political activists before? Had you been engaged in any way, or is this all new to you?
No, it was definitely actually new for us. We've always been outdoor enthusiasts, adventure enthusiasts, kind of escaping into the outdoors and frustrated and fed up with the state of the world and politics and the state of the environment. I guess that's what prompted us to do a documentary, really wanting to give back in some way. And Cascadia was what we came across that we felt really good about. You go.
Yeah, so coming from kind of outdoor enthusiasts as well, you start to realize that the path that you're on maybe is feeling a little bit empty as well. And I know we've always talked about that too, and really seeking out something that delves a little bit deeper into the culture. Like, everything that we did with the outdoors was very important, and it's a personal growth aspect, but in the end, the planet is still being destroyed was our take on it, and we weren't really doing anything to help that situation. We, if anything, were contributing to that situation, and that's part of the film that we're doing, really addressing the culture that we're a part of and how we can move past that as well.
So when you were in the thick of everything with the Occupy movement coming out, was that inspirational? Was it shocking? What did you see problems with it? Did it work really well? It's a very new thing. What was your take on that?
I think there were a lot of problems with Occupy. One of the problems was the lack of appropriate interpretations by the mass media and just continually having to talk to people and educate, and that was something that a lot of the different occupations around the nation and around the globe had issues with. At the end of the day, though, one thing that we observed across all of the occupations we attended, we also went to Occupy Eugene, Occupy Bend, we occupied in our hometown, was that each of the occupations, some of the biggest problems they dealt with were actually the greater problems of their communities. And that was something that was really interesting, because as occupations and encampments were continually being shut down, that was downplayed and underestimated. And so it really brought to light that it was much more about it was about much more than the 1% or just dealing with the kind of economic inequalities of our times. And it started to bring light that there's so many more issues coming into it. So it was actually a really good lead-in for us with Cascadia. I think what we took away from Occupy on a positive note, and there was a lot that we could learn from the Occupy movements, was just how much the people came together. I mean, the amount of effort that went into the occupation encampments just to provide security and logistics to maintain them was amazing and impressive and inspirational to watch people come together from all different walks of life that normally wouldn't get along or communicate with one another. And they just really came to the table and figured out how to help each other out. And the sense of community that you continually heard people reference, it really made us realize how much community we're lacking in a day-to-day basis in our monetized lives. So,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I've heard a lot of criticism of the Occupy movement as knowing what they're against, what they don't want, but they keep coming under criticism of not knowing what they do want, and they don't have a positive vision. But I mean, I'm a lifelong Cascadian, and I know I've had a vision of what is and what could be. Could you kind of describe how Cascadia has any relation to the Occupy movement?
Yeah, well, they are parallel paths, and they're both microcosms of the issues that we're dealing with in everyday life. And I think most people know what we want. We do have demands. We do have solutions as well to all of these cultural problems. And one of those is community. And so the process of coming together and forming community is also the process of shutting out all these corporate agendas, because that is the very thing that, or one of the main aspects that is stripping all of that away from us. So as soon as you label what it is, and it's really easy for people to pick apart. So I think that's where the whole aspect of we don't have what is our one demand, we don't have a demand. I think we have many demands. It's so much bigger than putting it to one thing. This is something very new. It's new territory. It's a new story, and it's unfolding every single day. So I don't know if you'd like to add that too.
I think that's where one of the reasons we left the Occupy movement for ourselves individually is that bioregionalism offers a full encompassing paradigm shift that we were looking for. I think it's important to note that every place on Earth exists within a bioregion, and a bioregion is defined by the ecological, geological, hydrologic, and the cultural peoples that live upon that land base, as they are an extension of the place where they live. For us, ours is Cascadia. Cascadia extends from Northern California to the southern panhandle of Alaska, and then out to the continental divide of western Montana and British Columbia. And it includes it's defined by the hydrologic cycles and all the river and watersheds that enter the Pacific Ocean through the Great Temperate Forests of the Northwest. And so right there, I think that tells us a lot about what bioregionalism is that it's no longer defined by political and arbitrary lines that don't mean a whole lot, and they don't have much value in our lives. It's a monetized economic system, whereas bioregionalism gets us to really step away from that nation-state angle of looking at our world and getting back to the land base and being an extension of the land and the places where we live.
So, I mean, I've been familiar with bioregionalism for a long time. It's older than I am. True bioregionalism might be our native idea as a species, but so the original idea came out in the late 60s, early 70s, and it's been around for a while, and I don't know, it hasn't seemed like it's been really changing things. We still live with nation states, and the criticism of the nation state is hundreds of years old. So my question is, do we see a shift right now that's taking place, that beyond Occupy we see a global uprising and this global understanding, be it through digital technology or some other form of, global consciousness is a key word right now. Do you see this as an idea whose time has come, whose incubation period is now over, and is that something that's happening right now? Because it might be just an old idea that didn't work.
No, I absolutely agree that its time has come. And I think that you can really look around the world and start to see that. I mean, if you look at places, I mean, just within the United States, places like Vermont and Texas and in the Deep South and the Great Lakes region and the Rocky Mountains and California and Hawaii and Alaska.
Appalachia.
Yeah. You know, and then you look into places in Central and South America and in Europe, and the idea is being born all around the planet at the same time. People from all walks of life are starting to speak the same language and understanding the importance of getting back to the land base where we live. And there's a lot of implications when we dig into those layers. But just starting to recognize that is the first step. And we don't have to have all those answers ahead of time. We just have to start taking a tangible step somewhere, because we're so divided and systems are in it's a dire situation right now. I think everybody can acknowledge that in some way or fashion. So okay. I think it's important to find that first step. And right now it seems, I'm very optimistic that bioregionalism is a really appropriate step to get us back to our land. And
yeah, I would just add to it, it really is the only step. Globalization is really what's oppressing people all around the world, and it is kind of the root of the problem of these uprisings. We're going into these countries and we're forcing them into a monetized system in which before they were able to live within their land base, and no longer can they live on the land in which they live. They have been forced to pay for the products which were once free. We're monetizing healthcare, we're monetizing community care, child care, really everything. The food that once we could just grow on the trees and plant in the soil we could eat, now it all must be paid for. So it has not made our life easier through this process. It's made our life not only much more difficult, but we've become sicker because of it as well. And just that's about all.
I mean, my concept of Cascadia has been, an appropriate way for people living in that privileged empire to change their ways so as to, end the actual global system that's oppressing other people throughout the world. And it's good to hear you make that distinction. I think that the connection with Cascadia and the rest of the world, and that's what I like about bioregionalism. It implies that we are part of a biosphere, and it goes both ways, and there's no place to just really stand there and hold your ground and call everyone else the other. So, Well, actually, so you guys have a clip from the film. So you're currently in production. You're still traveling around, doing footage, doing interviews. We can go to a clip and play that really soon. And then after that, we'll discuss it. And all right.
Yeah.
Go to the clip as soon as we're ready.
Okay. Great.
We have a number of identities that sort of ripple outward, and the first is really as beings in a universe that's alive.
This place has a lot of beauty, and the land here kind of forces you to pay attention to it.
Deep in our past, we remember how beautiful it could all be. All of us carry something of that memory.
The land is what gives us life. So in order to really have that connection to the cosmos, I think you kind of have to go through the land.
if you identify with the landscape, if you're eating from the landscape and it's making your body, you can see the landscape as an extension of your own body. You recognize that you are made up of this space, and that's why you don't want to destroy this place.
Every region that we live in has something to offer, has been sustaining life in some way for thousands and thousands of years.
Whether or not we can see it at any given point, we are in a situation which is a war. And I think there are two sides to this conflict. One side is these forests that we're sitting in right now, and the other side is the force that wants to cut down these forests.
If you try to live from the place in which you're actually situated, you start to see that it's been destroyed and that it's still being destroyed. And so what are the forces that we're up against?
They are so greedy and they are so blinded by just a mythical ideology. I never thought that the ruling elites in Europe and North America were going to prove this incompetent at solving incredibly important problems.
I think the biggest problem with civilization isn't that we've exported agriculture and created this population feedback loop, but that we think everybody has to live the way that we do. So we've gone around the whole planet and destroyed it based on that one belief.
And it's, you know, these vast industrial capitalist industries. So industrial logging, industrial fishing, industrial agriculture, that's what's destroying this place. So in order to stop it, we're going to have to confront all that.
So I guess one of the failings of environmental protection in the region is that we are still part of a deeply overconsumptive culture.
Worldviews create worlds is a statement which in many ways is an expression of the law of attraction and the ability for us to manifest from our perception of the world what we get.
This region has a symbolism of being the edge of civilization, that final last stand of trees, of old growth trees, and saying basically no.
What role will regions play in solving our problems in the foreseeable future? It's important for people to understand there will be no solutions coming out of Washington.
If we are going to be one organism called humanity, in the oneness, in the unitive consciousness that we associate with the age of Aquarius, it's about this kind of movement. It's about this kind of thing.
If we take the land where we live as the foundation of all our actions, and if we look to the forest, which, because of its existence, is improving the world around it every second of every day.
Learn about who lives with you. You know, learn about your plant neighbors and your animal neighbors. And, you know, help yourself to love where you live, because you will fight to defend what you love. And we need that now more than ever.
I think it's just got to go for the land, because that's where the transformation is, that's where the mystery is, and that's where, you know, those moments of life and death and rebirth and regeneration, that's where it all begins. That's why we're alive.
So we can inform our viewers that your project is currently up on Kickstarter.com. Could you tell us more about that and how the viewers could check that out for themselves?
Yeah, sure. So either going directly to Kickstarter and searching Occupied Cascadia, or like the title at the end of the short there said, visiting cascadiamatters.org. You can also link to it through there. And what Kickstarter is, it's an all-or-nothing funding platform where we can help to raise funds for finishing up the film, which there's a lot of costs included with that. So what you can do is you can pledge money. We've got a bunch of gifts that we offer, depending on the amount of money that you pledge to it. And once we get that funding, we're going to be able to tour around the bioregion and finish filming all the production costs, and we'll also be able to, that'll all go towards film screenings as well. So once it's all done, we want to tour again around the region and really invite as many people as possible to be able to see this film, as well as panel discussions, so that we can kind of add more content to it as well.
So you're hoping to involve the community in the film itself, as much as possible?
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds great.
Absolutely. Up to this point, everything's been 100% volunteer, and we're going to continue to donate 100% of our time. Everybody that we've interviewed has been really enthusiastic and excited to talk about these subjects in this conversation and dialogue. And we hope to be enlisting some of the people that we've interviewed in these panel discussions and getting really local communities involved at the most grassroots level at all film screenings and panels. So
great. So I've never been involved with filmmaking, and I've gotten to know you folks, and I've been fairly impressed with your work. There seems to be an unorthodox approach to documentary filmmaking. That it wasn't very flashy, what we just saw at all. Is that a deliberate thing that you all are going for?
It was definitely intentional. When we first started out on this project, we didn't quite know how we were going to put this together, because the concept of Cascadia, the concept of bioregionalism, is very extensive. It's kind of like jumping down an endless rabbit hole. So we just hit the road and started talking to people, I guess you could say. It really came together in an organic fashion. We like to say that the land kind of wrote this story, in all honesty, and we just followed our hearts and followed the voices and the people that we met along the way, and things came together. When it came to actually putting together the short and the trailer and how we planned to do this film, we had a hard time grasping how to go about that in a mainstream kind of context. Typically you have a voice or something that you're going to follow through, and in this case we didn't want it to be about the movement or the people or any of the specific people that we're filming. It's really about the land, it's about Cascadia. And so after a lot of analyzing and looking at that, we decided to let the land be the voice. And so some people have commented it's a little bit slow, but part of that is that we really want to slow people down, because we're in such a mainstream paced society. I mean, our trailer's 9.5 minutes. Most people, if it's past 5 minutes, they're going to shut off and tune away to the next thing. And so it was deliberate for us to make it a slower piece and get people to look closer. We come from a still photography background. We're not filmmakers. This is our very first project we've ever worked on. And something you do with still photography is a lot of intimate looking at the landscapes and intimate imagery, and we wanted to carry that over into the video and this filmmaking process to really get people to look closer at the land and the life that lives upon this place.
Okay, so I hear a lot of different ideas kind of floating around. Like there's Cascadia as a bioregion, as a living entity. I know you talk to some people and you almost get this mystical quality about it, like this is a living piece of the earth. But then on the other hand, there's a lot of angry political people or upset political people are drawn to this idea. And I know you go down to the store and you find a bottle of beer and it says secession and it has a Cascadian flag, and everybody kind of laughs about it. Like, is it a political movement? Is it a non-political movement? Are you not concerned with politics? Like, how does that tie together in your minds?
For me, and for us, I would say that, I mean, that's a complicated answer, because everything about our lives is political. For us, however, Cascadia is not a political movement. It's really, it's going back and looking at how we do things as a dominant culture. We live in nation states, and nation states put politics and economics first, always. Cascadia for us is really about stepping away from that political system and making community and ecology be our driving forces of society, life, and culture. And while there are some people that view Cascadia as a full-on secessionist movement, there are other angles about that. I mean, at this point in time, I think that that's, in a way, kind of a waste of our energy. I mean, we're already in a war. We're in a war against the environment. We're in a war against humanity. We're in a war for life on Earth to exist. So
Yeah, no, I can just add to that. We are in a war. Yeah. These are not problems that can be solved politically. We've proven time and time again that if the politics dictate the ecology, or if the politics dictate the culture, it's a backwards process that doesn't work out, because there's always ulterior motives involved with that. So what we're trying to say is we have to let the culture dictate the politics, and we have to let the ecology dictate the politics, not the other way around. To say that we need to secede for this to happen, I think, it's just a waste of energy. We all know what that would actually mean. We've had a civil war in this country before, and that was a very awful thing. And to kind of build upon that, that's just not a very deep way to go about things. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of violence involved with that, and how can we become what we're envisioning while using those same types of tactics and using the same thing that has brought us down in history? We need to learn from those mistakes, and we need to create something really that this world has never seen. This is a paradigm shift, and we need to get outside of the arbitrary borders. We need to get outside really arbitrary politics and really start opening up the dialogue to how we can do things differently. I think the solutions are there. They just haven't been talked about. They've either been oppressed by the mainstream media or straight up we've just chosen to ignore it as well. So we need something different all around here.
So do you have a few ideas of how to go forward with this that you find really inspirational? Like where is your excitement, and if I can use the word hope, where is your active hope in letting Cascadia be the reality that it already is?
I think for me it really comes to the capacity for Cascadia to unify us. I mean, we live in Bend, and Bend is a mosaic of individuals. If we're going to put labels upon it, we could say red and blue, Democratic and Republican, conservative, liberals. I really don't like those labels myself. I think they're media created, and they tend to divide us. When we really get down and talk to people at the most fundamental level, what we've been finding with this concept of bioregionalism in Cascadia is that it really, people let their guards down, and we're starting to find our commonalities. And that's what's so powerful about bioregionalism. That's why we're becoming more and more passionate about it every day, is because it really, I believe it has the capacity to unite us. And just again, going back to that part, if we put our ecology and our community first, that puts our needs first before our politics. And at the end of the day, we all have very similar fundamental needs. And so if we can start to look at what our commonalities are and not worry about the rest of those issues that, in all honesty, have more to do with fundamentalism than what our basic human needs are, I think we could make a lot of progress really rapidly.
Yeah, the solutions are already there for us. You ask a right-winger, you ask a left-winger, and they're going to give you the same answer of what we need. We need the community. We need each other. We need the water to be clean. We need the air to be clean. We need to be able to breathe the air. The future generations are going to need to be able to breathe the air, and that's really the only thing they're going to care about in the end. So it is a hard question to say, like, how do we go about this? I think just recognizing everything that's going on right now, and recognizing our commonalities with life, and that's that we all need the same things, and that's part of this whole process is relearning how to live with each other and relearning what we need in life.
Yeah, that's been a real impressive thing, like growing up on the conservative side of the state of Oregon in that Intermountain region. Some people like to describe Cascadia as that far west coast, I-5 left-wing independence, granola cruncher revolution, but throughout the actual watersheds in the bioregion of Cascadia, the arch conservative people that I talk to, they dislike federal control and the federal government much more than some of the lefties, right? And it seems like there's this media heist where ecology is an opinion, and my daydream is to turn all the right wingers, if they could just get ecology, they could keep everything else in their own rights, and man, we'd really be on the same side. And so I would love to see that happen. I hope your work can maybe do something to help that out.
Yeah.
I think that's where it comes back to kind of the dominant culture and these monetized systems that we're a part of. I'm from Montana, which is a pretty rural area. And when you look into rural areas the world over that are struggling, and I mean, in America, a lot of rural areas tend to be red or conservative. And I think that a lot of that comes from they're wanting freedoms, and they're seeing the the Democrats or the liberal side is kind of oppressing those freedoms and trying to protect everything. And it's really, that's where looking at this from a bigger picture angle, this isn't just about solving these short-term political issues. This is about really trying to dig as deep as we can into the dominant cultures and the struggles of humanity with the oppression of the dominant culture upon us. And so when you're looking at these rural areas, that are being oppressed financially, and they're seeing any protections of an environmentalist as trying to threaten their way of life because they're trying to survive in an economic system. A lot of times they're forced to decimate the land base where they live, and then they no longer have the capacity to live off of that land base. And so they're forced into these monetized systems without a way to support and sustain. And so they have a lot of anger, but it's projected out onto environmentalists.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I'd like to kind of add to that too, something that Charles Eisenstein, who he was here a couple of weeks ago, and one of the quotes that he said, and he might have been quoting somebody else when he said it, but he said a corporation or a corporate board will turn a soft heart cold. And I think what he was alluding to that is that all these people are really just playing out the roles in which society has given to them. You know, nobody necessarily wants to clear out every single tree in the forest, but when you look at the system and it says you can clear cut this whole forest right now and you can make $10 million and you can make $10,000 a year off the interest, or you can log it sustainably for the rest of eternity and make $10,000 a year, it's really not a question about what they should do. Like, even if they're compassionate and they don't want to do it, that system's going to eject them automatically, and it's not going to allow them to make a compassionate choice for the earth. So no matter what their good intentions are to it, it makes it very difficult to act out on those intentions. We don't really live in a system that allows that at all. So it's not the people, it's not the individuals, it's our culture.
well, and I think one thing too, if you're going to care about your land base and your community around you, you really have to have community in order to care. And we're in these monetized systems, and I don't believe that you can have community in a monetized system, because you don't actually need one another in a day-to-day basis. It's a very individualistic pursuit and path, and we don't need each other. We don't have gift economies and other options that are on the table. So
yeah, that just reminds me of certain places in central and eastern Oregon where you have a road and you've got farmers down the road, and there's people out doing biodynamic agriculture and rotational holistic management and this really progressive stuff. They're open-minded, they're environmentally sensitive, and then their neighbors are, they've been there for some generations and they've been listening to the normal media, which makes them hate environmentalism, and that's the scapegoat. And they're all just losing their farms, they're losing their land to an economic system. And I see this bringing people together. And do you see bioregionalism as a practical shift away from the economy that's failing everyone right now?
Yeah, absolutely. It shows us that we can live within the land base and that it can sustain life for us. And that, these farmers that you're speaking of, not only are they losing it, but they can't even afford to buy the food at some point too, and they can't even, some of these large like monoculture farmers, they don't even have gardens themselves to feed themselves anymore. And when my dad was a child and farmed, like, it was never a question. Yeah, you sustained yourself and you made money, but you always knew that you had something to eat as well. So bioregionalism, it does offer this, because it takes away this idea that we need money to live, that we need something, and it's not to say that money is bad and that it has to be disappeared, but the whole idea of interest and constantly oppressing down on us, forcing us into even bigger loans, where still our lands just continually get destroyed over and over again, and it's not working. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, if we go even beyond the farming aspects, we just look at how our approach to land right now. We have ownership over land. We are not stewards of the land. You look to indigenous populations, and they were stewards of the land. They knew that they had to take care of that land base and the beings upon it in order for it to continue to provide for them. And nowadays we have a very capitalist dominant cultural approach to these systems, and we look at our land as ownership, and we can buy and sell that, and we can do what we want. And part of property ownership is that it's a commodity to you. And so we take our resources and we take our resources and we decimate our land base and we turn them into dead commodities so that they're available on the free market state. And I think therein lies our biggest problem, and it has less to do with any of the specifics. I mean, I think at the end of the day that the things that we're up against, I mean, we constantly hear about resource wars and resource scarcity happening. And you look at the global economies and they're destabilizing. I mean, look at what's happening in Europe right now. It's a good sign of things to come for everybody. And then we think about how divided we are as a nation and the systems that we're up against. I mean, here in America, our national debt is going out the roof every day, and we're looking at continually declining our rights and declining our public services and social systems. And so our gap between the 1% and the 99%, as the Occupy movement puts it, is growing continually more and more every day. And it's just, I think it's really important. And then to look at all that, and then look at the state of the environment, and that, you know, according to a lot of recent reports, we have 5 years to stop the use of fossil fuels, or we're headed towards a very negative biotic system. When we look at those things, that's really frightening. And I think that it's important to look at that fear too. I mean, it sounds so overwhelming when we talk about bioregionalism, because there's so many layers to this infinite onion, if you will, to be shed here. And so we have to start looking at all of that. And I think that this gives us a tangible way to start having that dialogue. I mean, that's one thing when we're doing the film tour, we really want to focus on the film screenings with panel discussions, because this film is going to have a lot of information where it's going to have a lot of this dialogue and a lot of these conversations from all sides of the spectrum. And I think it's important to have talks about this in our community. We have to start talking about these problems, or we're going to end up in the apocalyptic collapse that we all reference. I mean, everybody, it doesn't matter if you're talking to a liberal or a conservative person, everybody has some grasp of collapse, you know? I like in Ascent of Humanity that one of our cast members, Charles Eisenstein, wrote. He references that the activists say that it's because of our detachment from community, and the environmentalists say it's our detachment from environment. The religious people say that it's our detachment from God, and that the psychologists say it's a detachment from ourselves. And so it's, you know, we're all stuck on our path and thinking that we have the answer, but we're not actually communicating with each other. And if we came together and we started talking and communicating, we might actually find that our commonalities are far greater than we thought.
Yeah, and speaking of commonalities, we were just talking about farmers basically being driven from their land, forcibly ejected from a place that they found, and it just reminds me that they're not the first people to be driven from their land. And I've noticed, well, obviously your title is Occupied Cascadia, not Occupy Cascadia, and from an indigenous view from this place, the word occupy, some people have called it offensive. People that are speaking decolonization, you know, they've said, how can you call this occupy? We're already occupied. Is that what you're getting at with your title here?
Oh yeah, I mean, without a doubt. Looking at the different types of cultures that there have been, and obviously there's many, you can't really narrow it down necessarily into one or two types, but what we see as our culture as right now is a culture of occupation already. So, and whereas an indigenous person would have been more of a land-based culture, living within those means, not exporting, not importing, and things like that. So, to say occupy it's like occupy what we're already occupied, and it also is a word that's associated with the language of the dominant culture. It has really negative connotations. It means that you come in and you take over an area. And if we're going to move on from this process and move forward in life and not repeat the same things that we've done before, I think we really need to consider our language and the words that we use. So I personally do see occupy as a little bit offensive. Maybe not personally, but just thinking like, how can we move on from this and talk about more of the solutions and get away from that word and all the words that we associate with this dominant culture.
Yeah, I know. I feel like my life is occupied by an economic system, and I would like to end the occupation as soon as I possibly can. And feeling the need to do that as a community is the most pressing thing in my life.
I think that's something that we're starting to see even within the Cascadia movement. I guess you could call it a movement. Within the Cascadia movement, is that everybody is really rapidly trying to decolonize inside, and what that means, because we have to start here and then help it happen on a collective scale. You know, we try to recognize every day that we are on occupied land, and that there were indigenous peoples that lived on this land for thousands and thousands of years in harmony with this base, and they have been forced onto reservation
they're
camps.
Still here. They haven't gone anywhere.
But they are still here, and I think that, you know, one of the next big legs of our film and what we're doing the Kickstarter fundraising campaign for is that we want to go across the bioregion, and it's going to be about a 5,000-mile trip we're going to be taking, and we're going to be talking to Indigenous voices across this land base, and really trying to highlight for people everything they have to offer, and showing their situation, and that they are still here, and that they are the most oppressed of all the peoples on this land base. I mean, yes, we deal with political oppression and economic oppression and everything else, but they've literally been raped and pillaged off their land and forced into concentration camps. And we fail to recognize that as a society every single day. And I think it's really time that we start coming to grips with the causation of what our culture is. And it's not to say that I personally am guilty for that, but if I continue to know that it exists and I don't do something about it, I am absolutely a contributor to that problem. So we have to start there by getting back to getting all those voices empowered.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I recently heard a lecture given by Jeanette Armstrong. She's a Okanagan activist from the Okanagan watershed, and she's speaking of indigeneity, and made a distinction between indigenous and indigeneity. And you mentioned like what indigenous people have to offer, and it's like, well, they don't have to offer anything, but when we do listen to the people within our bioregion who do have these cultural ties, whose nations are here and whose nations haven't gone anywhere, they are reaching out and saying like, I'm impressed, as I was born here, but my nation exists on the Misty Isles somewhere in Europe, right? But I'm here now, and to see that there is this community, strong communities that exist. They've been under occupation for a long time. It's nothing new to them, and the cultural revival that's going on throughout like the Cascadian coast and the canoe culture coming back, and it's so impressive to see this. And it's really sad that it's so ignored as, the true nations of our land base, that this land base has adopted me. I feel welcomed by it. And to see that the cultures that have known this land base for a long time are coming back and having a revival. And I mean, they'll speak of the fulfillment of prophecies. And I don't know what prophecies they are, but it's beautiful to see. It makes me think of bioregionalism as a shift away from the concept of the nation state, that fake empire. How do members of a culture of occupation shift to a relationship with the land base and not bring in cultural appropriation, sure. Not take more and more from the indigenous people,
right.
Not take it's good to see that there are ideas, help being offered from the people here, but like how do we avoid this repeating the same patriarchal, condescending thing that showed up here from Europe once upon a time?
I mean, it's recognizing that at one point in time we all came from an indigenous we were all an indigenous population, and we came from our peoples came from some place, and that we were all raped and pillaged off to our land and continued and forced out to go out, and we were forced to occupy other lands, and that we are continuing on that occupation on this land right now. I mean, first and foremost, in Cascadia, I mean, we could do things like taking out the dams and getting wild food sources back and sustainable, and re-empowering indigenous voices here to be able to live off of their land base once again. And when I say like looking to them and what they have to offer to us, it's not that we want them to, like with Cascadia, we're not asking the indigenous people of this land. They have far deeper and richer and more land-based traditions with this place than we will ever see in our lifetime for us. And we're not asking them to embrace this new as Cascadians, but I mean, this land is a living, breathing entity, and all of us that are on it, we're an extension of that place. And what we're hoping with the Cascadia, what a lot of people in the Cascadia movement are hoping to do is to extend extend an invitation to Indigenous populations to see that there are people here that are part of the cultures of occupation of past, that we are trying to strip away from that as fast as possible, and that we no longer want to tolerate those things. We are ready to deal with all of the conflicts of dominant culture inside ourselves and as a society. And again, we may not know what that's going to look like at the end of the day, but we have to start working at it as fast as possible. And in that context, I think they have a lot to teach us about what changes have to be made and how you get back to living through the land.
Yeah, I was impressed as a person of Irish heritage. I was reading a book by Dave Montgomery called King of Fish about salmon, about global salmon, and how Ireland and England and all these places had huge salmon runs. And the history of my name actually comes from a river filled with salmon in Southern Ireland that doesn't have fish in it anymore, and my ancestors were forced to speak English in the same way that the original people who lived here were forced to speak the same language in these schools that the kids were forced off to, and we have the same story, but at some point we get recuperated into this empire culture, and we think we identify with it, and that's been enlightening for me to see that the same story is being repeated over and over again, and then that's what needs to end. And heck, we live by a place called British Columbia, and when you get into that, it's like, what? How did that name follow all the way over here? You get it.
No, and that ties right back into like, how do we move forward with this movement? And not create the same thing that we've been a part of before. And it's no longer just about destroying the bad people. We need to be embracing every single person that wants to accept, where we're headed to. Like the 1%, they need to be a part of it. Like I said before, like these bad people are just playing out the roles that the system provided for them. So yes, there are evil people in the world, but we need to start having more compassion in our hearts for everybody if we're able to move forward and not just create something that we've already seen before, because that's historically has been shown every time so far.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think that just talking again about that unifying factor of bioregionalism, I mean, happening on a global scale, that regional factor would be that
unifying.
The part of unifying just really that bioregionalism itself is not a separatist movement. A lot of people think that it's cameras, but a lot of people think that bioregionalism is a separatist movement. But at the end of the day, it's only separatist in an economic sense. But in all reality, it's about getting much deeper through all of these things. When we're talking about trying to strip away dominant culture in here and out there, that's that paradigm shift that we're talking about. Like, the revolution of this is really a build upon the entire ascent of humanity. I mean, we're digging back all the way to civilization to present day, and what that industrial civilization to present day and what that means. And we have to undo 10,000 years of civilization, and then the last few hundred years of industrial civilization within each of us and exteriorly. And this doesn't mean we have to go back overnight to hunter or gatherers. I mean, with 7 billion people, that's not really feasible. We have to start talking about this and moving in those directions. And for us, that's what the rest of our film is going to be exploring, and what that's going to, bringing together these different types of conversations about what that could look like.
Yeah. So it's almost, you think it's safe to say that if Cascadia as a bioregion becomes the ecological basis for any political organizing that might have to take place, is this movement of Cascadia, this is more of a decolonization movement than a occupation? I don't know. That's what I'm hearing out of it.
I love that word. It strips all the layers, and it exposes the layers, and it says like this is what we've been a part of, and civilization. Like when we talk about an end to civilization, like that can be a really beautiful thing, and it doesn't mean that it's mass die-offs of people or anything like that. It's about relearning to live with the land like we did before 10,000 years ago. we've always existed within a bioregion. Like, this is nothing new. It's as old as consciousness is. So the word decolonization, I think, it's beautiful. I love it. It's right up there with decentralization, which we could talk a whole nother hour about, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's really telling if you look at the people that would be opposed to bioregionalism. It really, I think that tells you a lot about the movement. I mean, one of the people we interviewed talks about that. If you look at the people that would be opposed to it, it tells you a lot about what you're trying to do. And I think that, you know, we all have, whether you're an environmentalist or a humanitarian or, you know, whatever your concerns are on whatever continent upon this planet, you know, something like bioregionalism really has the ability to start to rectify these bigger and greater issues of humanity, not just of Cascadia or the United States or North America. I mean, this is really humanitarian issues. You know, I always like to go back to a banana, for instance. You know, if I by me buying a banana, I'm causing terrorism to the people of the areas that produce bananas, to their land base and the people that depend upon that land base. Therefore,
or being complicit in it. Yeah.
Right. But exactly. And so if we really start to go back to living within our land base and minimizing exports and imports, you know, the only people that are going to be against that are going to be the people that are, in all honesty, the global elites, and offering them a new way of trying to help build a different world.
Who is opposed to bioregionalism anyway? It makes so much sense. Like who?
Yeah.
I think of a quote that Frantz Fanon said that decolonization is always a violent phenomenon, and I've been beginning to doubt that. I think that civilization is always a violent phenomenon, and I think that we could decolonize by ending violence, by alleviating the suffering. And do you think that there is a, you know, positive way to go forward with this without another civil war? Like, how do we take our power back without incurring the wrath of those who would be opposed to bioregionalism?
Yeah, we don't know where we're going to go or how it's going to happen, but really encouraging things have been shown with the Occupy movement, the fact that it's remained nonviolent. So I think it is very plausible for it to happen that way. If we look to the ecology and we recognize the violence that already is taking place because of these systems all around the world, recognizing the inherent violence that's already built into this system, then only then can we really realize how much we've all played a part in it. Nobody's exempt from this. Where your clothes are made and the food that you eat, you know, has violent connotations to it. So if we can recognize that, and then we can focus on localization projects like are already happening right here, then that is how we're going to be able to move forward and get past this whole idea of violence.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. One more time, Kickstarter. We've got the film on Kickstarter. You're still looking for support.
Yeah.
We have just a few more moments. Can you give the website one more time?
Yeah, it's cascadiamatters.org. And then on Kickstarter.com, it would be Occupied Cascadia, and absolutely any amount helps. This is an all or nothing thing. If we don't hit our funding goal, we won't be there.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for watching Occupy TV. It's been great to be here. Much love from Bend, Oregon. Thanks, Eugene, for having us.
Something happened.
Oh, goodness.
What it is ain't exactly clear.
That was awesome.
There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that?